Hello and welcome to Hidden Existence, and tonight it's the Researcher's Report, and with me, as always, my favourite co-host ever is Kerry Arnold. Hello, Kerry.
Hello, hello. How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I was doing all right, but I got over it.
Yeah, well, it's always the same thing, isn't it?
Very
Tonight,
true.
our guest, all the way from Bonnie, Scotland, is Charmaine. Welcome, Charmaine.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing good, thank you. Now, you had an encounter or witnessed something when you were seven-ish, up in Angus. You'll probably tell us more closely where you were. Normally, when I ask people or interview people about their encounters, I always go, what did you think about Bigfoot before you saw this thing? But because we live in the UK, this question doesn't really apply to us, does it?
Not really, no. No, I didn't have it. I didn't know what Bigfoot was before I had this encounter. I didn't know what it was for decades after I had it either. So, yeah.
We're just not aware of it here, are we? Like in America, in Canada. I remember seeing the Patty clip on something like John Craven's News Round in the 80s. Briefly this creature walking across the thing, and then that was it. You just, I was too young to really take it in or know what it was. But tell us about your encounter then, and where you were, and what you were doing, and what happened.
Okay, so this happened probably sometime 1979, 1980, something like that. I was about 7, 8 years old, and I was up in a place called Kermiley up in Angus. So that's about kind of 20 miles north of Dundee. And it's where my grandparents lived. And we were up there all the time as kids, and quite frequently one of the things I would do is we'd go down to one of the neighbours who lived down the road to pick up the newspapers for my granny and granddad. So I was out probably, I think that's what I was actually doing that day, and I was out with the dog, my grand's dog. And where they stay, they've got a wee rutted track. It's not even, you couldn't even call it a proper driveway. And that leads on to another little farm track, which then leads on to the farm road, and you go down that road to the neighbours. And I was coming down this little sort of driveway bit, and I was with the dog, and she stopped. She was on my left hand side, and she just stopped just before we got onto the straight farm track, and basically she was growling and whining, and her hackles were up, and I kind of didn't register this properly as I was kind of running past her. And I got onto the track just around this little bend that bends off to the right, and they're just kind of, it was 30 meters. I've measured it since those days, but it was just this large black figure standing right in the middle of the track, right next to a cottage that's on the track, and it was standing with its back to me. It was just large and black and kind of thick arms and legs, and I remember it had no neck, and it was just what it was doing was standing. It had an ash branch that had bent this ash branch down from one of the trees in the side of the track, and it was just looking at it, just looking at the leaves. That's what it looked like it was doing. And I just stood in like shock, like it just standing looking at it. I don't know how long I was standing there for. It can't have been more than a few seconds, and then I screamed. And as I screamed, it let go of the branch and just very slowly turned to start looking over its right shoulder. And I didn't hang about to see any more of it, and ran off back up to my granny's house, and I was in bits. I was absolutely terrified, beating on the door, and got in, and they're like, "What's wrong with you?" And I told them, and they were just dismissive. Oh, it must have been a neighbor, or they didn't take it seriously. So that was kind of the first thing I encountered. I think round about those years was a couple other things that I did see. One was at night when we were driving up this wee road to turn right along the track, and just a couple of 100 yards further up, there's the entrance to there's an old slate quarry that was up there, and right in the middle of the road by the entrance to this quarry, there's this large figure standing right in the middle of the road. And all I could see was it was this greyishy colour, and there was this orange eye shine. And it was really tall. It just looked like a really tall, kind of broad person. You just caught it in the headlights just as we were coming up the road, and then we turned right. And I didn't say anything because I just didn't want to properly register it. And then at some point in the summer, I think these happened over kind of maybe a couple of years. We were out picking, there's a lot of wild raspberries up there. There's a big gooseberry bush up kind of further up the other side of one of these tracks. And there's a few of us out. There's a couple of adults out. I remember my auntie and her friend were there, and I think one of my brothers. And we were walking along this track, and we heard back in the woods this long call. It was like, I remember when I first heard the Ohio calls, I thought, God, that's really, really bloody like it. And it wasn't, you learn it, you know what a cow sounds like, you know what all the noise, I grew up in the countryside, and it was in the woods. And I remember the adults commenting on what the hell was that. And then they just kind of shrugged it off and got on with what we were doing. So they were like the three main things that happened around that time. But the big thing was this thing standing there, broad daylight.
How tall do you think it was?
Well, I remember its head nearly came to the level of the guttering at the bottom of the roof of this cottage. Now, I've gone back years and years later when I decided I'm going to do some, like when I started to research, basically, it was like, I'm going to do some measurements and stuff. I got my brother to stand in, and we reckon it was about 30 meters in front of me, and it came up to just below the guttering on the cottage. So I measured that, and so it was around about 2 meters, maybe just a bit over 2 meters.
Okay.
Something
like over that. 6 foot then, just over 6 foot, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So.
And colour-wise, fur-wise?
Black. It was just completely black. I don't remember seeing any sheen off its fur. There was nothing like it. Was just black. That's one of the things that always struck me was just how black this was. You know what I mean? And yeah, there was no other features. I mean, apart from the shape of it, which was just bizarre. It was just, that was it. Just like a hole in the world, as I've always said. It's just pure black. So, yeah.
We've heard about black, haven't we? Blacker than black, Kerry.
Yeah, like almost blue. So black. A lot of animals around here, black is really just a dark brown, almost like chocolate. You'd call that black. But a lot of times we've heard reports of these creatures being almost purple, like so black that they're more blue than brown.
Yeah.
So what did you do after that then? You must have like you said, there was no internet back then or anything. How?
I mean,
process it.
I mean, I did have nightmares when I was a kid about this, and then it's always been in the back of my mind for years. I would kind of tell people, and folk were going, "Oh, well," and just kind of dismiss it because I didn't really. The best thing I could describe it as is it looked like a gorilla, but it was upright. And that was the kind of description that I would try and tell people. I didn't know what I was trying to explain. So it was always in the back of my mind. And then it was just by chance. When my son was younger, he was very into his documentaries. And Animal Planet was on, and Finding Bigfoot came on. And I'd never seen this before. And I'm sitting and I'm kind of watching this. And I'm like, so they're talking to witnesses. It was kind of in the early days when Finding Bigfoot was quite good. And it was kind of, basically, they were kind of doing witness interviews and stuff. And what these folk were describing really matched what I had experienced. And I was like, wait a minute, that can't be, not here. You kind of assume, Bigfoot's in America and Canada and these kind of places. But I thought, surely not, I thought, I'm gonna have a look online and see if I can find any other things in Scotland, and I did. It didn't take too long before I found started to find a couple of sightings. The first one I came across was one that was recorded, and it was in the mid-90s. There was a couple of guys up in Aberdeenshire, a place called Torfins, and they'd spotted this large black creature peeking at them from behind trees up in woodland up there, and I think they'd kind of chucked a rock at it and kind of shouted at it, and then got back to their car, and apparently it chased their car for a bit.
Right.
And they'd been interviewed by a guy called Mark Fraser. I think he was quite big in kind of crypto research, back in those days. And I thought, God, the description of this sounds very like what I saw, even though I didn't see its face. The rest of it, the kind of, I thought that sounds quite similar. And then, I kind of just kept looking, and there was a Silverman sighting back in the 80s out near Bathgate, which is just in West Lothian, not too far from here actually. And this creature had basically run along the road and run in front of this car, and they'd called it the Silverman because in the headlights it looked like this greyish silvery colour, so there was all these little things, and you were like, God, this is a bit weird. And then obviously I looked at all the American stuff and the Canadian stuff, and but really kind of wanted to focus on the UK and particularly Scotland. And I looked at, I was looking at Fortean forums, chat forums where people haven't officially reported anything, but you're looking for stories that are matching what you've experienced. And so, I come across things, people in Aberdeenshire, this gorilla kept coming up, this description of gorilla type creatures that would run across the road in the middle of the night kind of thing. And I thought, this is kind of weird. So I then kind of started speaking to people in kind of closed Facebook forum, and it turns out there was people all over the country had these similar experiences and describing the same things, and it kind of went on from there, and then it was Thomas Markham asked us if we could send a couple of the British sightings over to his website, and we did. And then next thing I know, the newspapers were getting in touch, like some of the small Scottish newspapers, and then it kind of just went a bit viral for a while, and I got quite, basically ended up doing talks about it, and
Right.
I've done a few podcasts and radio interviews and things, and then I had to leave it behind for so many years. I got into nursing, and that's a demanding job, so basically that kind of ended up having to take precedence. That and a teenage son, were just kind of taking up all the time. So
Scotland to me sounds like, a realistic place. If it was going to exist anywhere, I could imagine Scotland, just for its vastness of not a lot being up there, But
yeah.
It's cold, isn't it? It's cold up there. And where do you think they're...
It's more wet than cold, to be honest with you.
It's got to be colder than where I am. It's usually colder than where I am.
We're not known for tropical weather up here, no.
No. But, cave systems and stuff up there, there's lots of that in Scotland, isn't there? I mean, there's mountain ranges and all sorts up there.
Yeah, what I found is where, I've had people report sightings to me in Scotland. I had a sighting in Angus again, and I went to research the area. And these areas, there's a lot of woodland, there's a lot of farmland, but they're all kind of up on the edges of the hills, so kind of up near the glens and kind of over in Perthshire where there's lots of hills, but it's not the mountainous high areas like the Cairngorms, because they're quite bleak. There's not much in the way of shelter up there. It's more the hilly wooded kind of, I don't know if you've been to Scotland, but kind of areas like North Perthshire and kind of around those areas, and then right up kind of towards the west coast, there's a lot of forestation, a lot of shelter. I had a woman get in touch with me who lives up near Weem, up near Dunkeld, and Weem is actually Gaelic for caves, and there are cave systems up through those hill ranges, and lots of odd stories. It's an area that I want to actually dig into a bit more in terms of local folklore and stories and stuff. And she'd had a very credible kind of set of experiences is up there, and so I think there is a lot of kind of potential habitat I mean, I was arguing with someone because they're going, oh, but it's not vast wilderness. You go, no, but when I was young, they seem to have moved into the area. That wasn't always wooded. It was heavily wooded at the time with Sitka spruce, but that was only planted in the late 50s once the quarry shut down. And it came to maturity kind of late 70s, early 80s. So it's like they'd moved into the area and they seemed to be quite curious. It was almost like, you know, it was kind of, and also you're thinking, well, I suppose there's easy pickings to be had around farms and kind of where people are out in the countryside. You know what I mean? It's the women up in Weem, something they'd got into our compost bin, like it unscrewed the top of our compost bin and taken out chicken carcass and stuff. So they were, you know, so I mean, there's enough cover. There's certainly enough remote areas. Most of Scotland's population are kind of down the east coast and across the central belt, and the rest of it's fairly remote. So you've got the Highlands and you've got kind of the Perthshire and Angus and Aberdeenshire, and then you've got the borders south of here as well. So, and that's, you know, fairly remote land as well. It's not heavily populated. So yeah, there is a lot of areas that could support small groups, I suppose. It's perfectly possible. So,
Well, you know, understanding the nature of this creature a little bit, not saying that I do, but you know, we've looked into this for a while, and you know, I really don't think shelter is a big concern for this creature. You know, no more than a gorilla or you know a deer or a bear or anything would be worried about shelter. I think you're just looking at three things: food, water, and a place to hide.
yeah,
And you know, apparently these creatures are extremely proficient at hiding. And most, I don't think you need a really big, deep, dark, thick forest to support these creatures. You know, I think they just spend a lot of their time hiding. And I have to say, a place like Scotland, it takes a lot of courage for someone like you to come forward with their, you know, in the United States, especially now, you know, we talked about this the last 10 years, especially so many more accounts are coming out. You don't hear a lot about people reporting sightings of these creatures in Scotland because, you know, like you said before, or we talked about before, such a level of disbelief in it. You know, no, not here. Are you kidding me? That I can imagine that's the mindset there. So kudos, good on you for coming forward, and
well, I'll
hopefully,
just say it was kind of like, God, if I've gone through this, who else has gone through this?
right.
Because
That's
it's not a
exactly right.
nice thing to go through. It's not, as you know yourself, it's not a nice thing to have to experience. It's not something you go, oh, I'm so special, something's chosen me. It's not like it's an accidental thing that just scares the hell out of you. So if I can talk about it, then maybe there's a forum for other people to talk about it. You know, so and also there's that element of trying to figure out the best way you can what it actually is. Some understanding, I think, helps people make sense of these things that happen to them. So
I think it definitely needs more people, if they could, to come out and talk about it. We see reports written down, but there's something a bit different and compelling when you hear the actual person telling you what happened to them. And you know, over here, literally, there's no one to talk to about Bigfoot. If you bring it up with a friend who doesn't know anything about it, I mean, they're not even, can't even comprehend it. It's like, oh yeah, it doesn't exist though. You know, straight away they shut it down. It's a difficult subject. I've got a few friends that are going with it who are interested in it and happy to go with it, but it's nothing like America. There's just you pick and choose who you talk about it to, because you know they're not going to want to.
I mean, I've spoken to all sorts of people about it now because I'm not really that bothered, you know, about, you know, if someone believes me, it's not a case. I don't actually want someone to just blindly believe me anyway. It's not a case of I'm trying to convince someone, like, look, this is what I went through. This is why I look into this. I'm not definitively saying it's Bigfoot, but it does seem to match all the characteristics of so many other encounters that, you know, there is something there. But you know, it's about asking questions, really, because we're not. And because it's not taken up by the scientific community, no one would touch it with a barge pole because it would ruin their reputation. So, because people have said, well, how come they haven't found it? It's like, well, no one's looking. I said, it's a load of amateurs out there with cameras, and no one's. I said, it's not like the expedition to find the billy ape out in the Congo, is it? Where they've got, you know, all these kind of specialists and you know, people that really know their stuff, and they have all this equipment. It's not like that. It's you know, and you know, so that's why they're not found. Is one, they're very, very good at avoiding us because we are really, really easy to spot out in the wilderness. You know, it's like we're not stealthy people. And also, you know, no one's made a concerted effort, a proper effort with, you know, biologists and ecologists and all the guys that would go out and look for other species. They're not doing that for this because, I mean, their credibility would be at stake. So you wonder if it was done, what would they find? So,
yeah, it would be interesting. So you've been out, have you found, did you try and find a research area or try and look for more clues or prints or structures?
I spent a bit of time down in the borders. As I say, I got sent a very compelling photo that I've never made public from somebody in the borders, and I spent a bit of time down there. And I've gone and researched a few sightings that have come from people in Scotland. So, but it's very hard to find something definitive. You know, it's very, very difficult. I think sightings are accidental. You know, I think you'd be very lucky, or you'd have to live in an active area and be vigilant and have some kind of recording equipment going on all the time to catch something. So it's very difficult to actually find proof. I did find a really odd structure kind of on a deer fence when I went up to research a sighting that was sent to me, and this was up in Angus near a place called Kirriemuir. And I went up there twice, and the first time I went up, it's not even a big piece of wood. It's this long straight road, and it's got woodland on either side, and people actually live in part of the woodland on one side, but it's on the other side of the woods. And basically, the first time I went up there, I noticed that part of the deer fence had been torn down, which isn't an easy thing to do. They're fairly strong. Like all the posts were intact. So that's a bit odd because they'd seen a large black figure leap back into the tree line. And so I'd gone up and I'd had a look. And that day I went up with my sister, and I don't think she forgave me for this because it was a really weird atmosphere. There wasn't a sound in this stretch of wood, which is odd, right? I mean, quiet woods don't normally exist. That was odd, and a very oppressive feeling, and it just felt really awful. And she had nightmares for a couple of nights after it that she was getting followed by something. So I didn't take her back out with me, but I went back to the same stretch of wood about 2 or 3 weeks later, and it all felt completely normal. And we were walking along the road. I'd taken one of my friends up, and we were walking along the road, and we're walking on the road side, but just in the tree line, and there was this big structure on the inside of the deer fence, on the wood side. And it was like two big pieces of, like, two big branches. And what was interesting was they were up in a big X shape, but what was interesting was there was a live ash sapling had been used, and it had been woven in and out of the fence to keep these two big pieces of wood in place. So it was really odd, really, really strange. But you've got to be careful with stick structures. You can see all sorts of things that are nothing. You know what I mean? So, but that was odd. That's on. I do have a YouTube channel. It's not got much on it, but that is on it. There is footage of that. But what was interesting was there was a sighting in that area a few months earlier. So, but it's hard to get out. I don't currently have a car. It's strange because just kind of when I was doing research in the borders, my car broke and I couldn't get it fixed. Then my computer and my phone both broke, and it was all within a couple of months. And that just killed everything, you know what I mean? Because you're not going to get many Bigfoot sightings in Edinburgh, you know.
No.
Yeah, I'll have to get that sorted out. But,
so in terms of groups, how have you got along? How have you found the community? Do you think we're working together, or
at all?
what do you think the difficulty is?
I think there's so much speculation that goes on. It's very easy. Like, I mean, a lot of it is opinions, and that makes it difficult because no one's kind of working from one set of parameters, if you like. So, I mean, I've got my set of parameters. I think we're dealing with a primate. I think we're dealing with something that's flesh and blood. I think that we're dealing with, you know, this physical thing that has behavior patterns, and we could probably learn a lot from looking at other great ape behaviors and all this kind of thing to get an idea of stuff, you know, trying to look at it with some basis in something we can refer to. Other people don't believe that. They think it might be an interdimensional being, or you know, other people have had different experiences of things, and we don't know if everybody's experiencing the same thing because it's all anecdotal, it's all online. There's a lot of arguments, there's a lot of kind of bickering about things, and some people set great store by certain things and other people don't think it's important. And I think we're not very good online. I think people in general, online behavior tends to be a lot more toxic. Like, I see this whether it's in Facebook groups or when I'm playing Warcraft, you know what I mean? It's like you just see this toxic behavior because people are protected. You know, you would never speak to people face to face the way you do online. So it's very, very hard not to get into arguments. There seems to be a lot of politics, and I just find it gets in the way of everything. But I think that can be said for the whole paranormal community. It's not just the Bigfooters. So people tend to fall out with each other, and then there's another splinter group, and then there's another splinter group. And I just feel we're not working in any kind of proper collaborative way, you know, and it's a bit frustrating. I kind of start to find it very stressful, and so I just kind of had to step away from it all. Because if you're not careful, you get sucked away from how you wanted to go about it in the first place. You know what I mean? And you kind of get bogged down in all this stuff that isn't actually, well, I don't find relevant. It might be important to other people, but it's not working for me. So I think maybe a few years away hasn't been harmful. It kind of it's let me get a bit of perspective on, right, if I'm going to go back and research this, I've got to set my own standards, you know what I mean, of observing and kind of using rationality and kind of being quite critical and kind of only accepting evidence that's of a really high standard. I think if you speculate too much, you can't see the wood for the trees, if you like, you know. So yeah.
I think that's why there's a lot of people just hang on to anything, and that's why it's never taken seriously enough. You know, it muddies the waters of what we think we know to just adding loads of extra stuff into it. And some people like to go along with the fantasy of it all. I don't know any other word, but other than this sort of thing that's created this image. And a lot of people don't know what the difference is.
Well, that's it, and it becomes something akin to a belief system. It's not a scientific endeavor at that point. It's a set of beliefs, and it's faith, and that's not good enough if you're trying to find absolute evidence of anything, whether it's ghosts or UFOs or whatever. You really need to have unfortunately, the ghost guys have got it down pat. They've got all the tech, you know what I mean? They've really they're leagues ahead of us. So yeah, and then it's very easy to then offend people because you're offending their beliefs and they take it personally rather than kind of going, well, have we looked at this? You know, it's like, I don't know, I've got a psychology background. It's research psychology. So having a bit of a research background does help in terms of trying to figure out sane ways of looking at insane things, I suppose. But you're not going to get far fast.
No.
You know, I see. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what do you think, Kerry?
Well, no, I think, you know, part of this is the nature of the creature itself, but the lines between facts and opinion, you know, get blurred by, you know, personal incredulity. And that's part of the issue here. If you could get everyone to look at this, to not be able to fall back on, well, it just doesn't exist. Because if you haven't seen it, you people tend to fall back on that when they hear so many things. And another part of this is the vastness range of behavior and the way they look, the way they act of this creature. So many people, you know, they have their sightings, other people listen, they get an opinion, they just latch on to whatever fits into their personal paradigm. And you know, religion gets brought into it a lot, unfortunately politics every now and then. But I think if you could get people to just from the beginning throw away this creature doesn't exist, they do exist. Now think what's possible here from a natural physical standpoint. How is it possible this creature can exist here? What is it doing? Throw out the, well, it just doesn't exist because we would have good pictures of it and we should see it up walking through the woods. Well, if it exists, why don't we have these things? It's the creature itself. If you get more people, I think, to look at it that way and take, you know, personal incredulity out of it, then I think we would get a little farther in this. But the bottom line is we don't know a lot about this creature, even 50 whatever odd years of it really being forced into the forefront of the public. We still don't know a whole lot. And you can kind of understand these people that do this for 20 years and they don't really know a whole lot. That's a hard thing to admit to someone. I've been looking for this creature for 20 years. I don't really know a whole lot. You know, it's kind of a dig on you, on yourself personally. You can take it that way, and you could see someone else possibly taking it that way. So people make things up. Well, you know, they do this, and I've discovered they do this, and you know, they talk to you like they've actually witnessed and seen them do these things, and unfortunately, people buy it, and that's part of the problem we have, especially here in the United States. It's rampant, but we battle it. We do our best.
Armchair experts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them. What do you know about? I don't know if we've had any dogman reports in the UK. Maybe where? All right, okay.
There are a few. I heard of one that was reported up in Perthshire. I don't know when it was, but he was a friend of somebody who does paranormal research, and he's actually been on like Facebook groups saying, yes, this is what we saw. So they saw one night, it was these guys, and they were up near Glen Eagles in Perthshire, and they're driving along the road, and this thing, they saw a deer running out, and then they saw this thing run out, and he described it as one of those creatures from the film Dog Soldiers. He said it looked like that. So I think that was somewhere back in the early 2000s that was seen. There's also a guy who now lives in America, and I remember I listened to this guy on the radio. It was a podcast. It was that long ago. But he had come from Morayshire up in the northeast, and him and his dad had come across something one night when they were walking home from a neighbour's house, and he said, you know, I won't go camping, I won't go out. But what he described was, you know, it was like that werewolf type, that snout, that kind of, what he described was very, very different from how people describe a kind of a Bigfoot face, you know what I mean? So there are a few dogman sightings that I've heard of up here. So I don't know so much about down south. I think there have been a few talked about, yeah. Don't know what that is.
That was a scary movie.
What, Dog Soldiers?
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
When I saw it, I was a kid, and that thing that just creeped me out. That was yeah, very scary.
Yeah, it is quite a good film, that one.
Well, could you imagine running into something like that? You know, in real life,
you would really rather not.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's just think about that for a second. You're face to face with this. My gosh, we've heard of this. People talk about Dogman and it being, you know, ugly and creepy and gnarly. And, you know, we just talked to, you know, Matt Johnson, who said they're a good being. Again, how anyone would know, absolutely, I don't know. But just imagine.
I'm forgetting there was actually an encounter not that far from here I think it happened in the 90s. And it's known as the Wolfman of Polton Mill encounter. And there's these guys there. So there's a little kind of town just on the edges of Edinburgh called Bonnyrigg. And there's an area called Polton Mill. So it's this old mill and warehouses, and they're right on the edge of the river. There's a valley that runs up, kind of, it goes past, Roslin Chapel and stuff. So basically Roslin Glen and all that. There's a river and a ravine that runs right kind of down towards the coast. And this is on that river. And basically, these three guys, they were just normal working guys, and they'd come back to the warehouses where they kept their gear to drop off their tools and things one night, and they saw this large hairy figure standing on the roof of their storage unit. And they basically got in their van and left. This thing jumped down, it started to chase them, and they described it as a wolfman. Now, a friend of mine, there's a guy I know who knows these guys, and I really need to, I'd asked him before, I need to speak to these guys, because this was a sighting that I'd only found one mention of it online. It was very, very hard to verify. I couldn't find it anywhere. And then I used to run a wee group, and this guy said, I know these guys. He said one of them went out and bought himself some serious big dogs after that. Like, they won't go out after dark. They don't like going out around the area after dark, or they won't go in the woods, and it really traumatized them. I really would like to speak to them firsthand and find out what they encountered. But they described it as it sounded like a dog man type description, so that's quite an intriguing, because it wasn't even that far from here, but there are a lot of kind of like steep wooded ravine type areas along this river. So yeah, that's quite a compelling one. I almost forgot about that. So, but yeah, when I've got someone who's going, I know these guys, and this is how they reacted, and it's really kind of traumatized them.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? Is the reactions, and something I heard you saying in the podcast, the details people come up with, that they couldn't make up, or you don't think they could make up.
No, that's very telling. I mean, I prefer first-hand accounts, to be honest with you, because then you can judge for yourself. Because people that are making stuff up, they don't have those details. They don't say, oh, well, it was doing this and some silly little thing, or descriptions of and quite often they'll describe what was going on around them as well, not just the actual immediate and just all the little things. That'll tell you if someone's really seen something. And I think it helps if you yourself have witnessed something, because I've had people contact me and it's so vague, and you're going, well, I'd like to know more about this and all, and then they never get back in touch, but they give you all these vague details, and then you're going, that doesn't sound right. Or I've had people tell me some real nonsense, and you think, yeah, that doesn't quite ring true. Or the way they reacted, and you're just like, they're going, oh, I stopped and I went out and it was dark in the woods, and this thing had watched me from the side of the road, so I stopped my car to go out and see what it was. It's like,
right,
yeah, you're not going to do that. You're just
I could say a lot about that one.
Yeah,
trust me. I have a problem, and my problem is I have seen it. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but because I've seen it, I'm not talking about Dog Man here, I'm talking about Bigfoot. Because I've seen it, I tend to believe everybody. I have this, and it all comes down to trust. It all does. But when I hear, and this one sticks out, I've probably said this before. As a matter of fact, I know I have. This guy, he's fishing, and he's standing on a boat dock, river's 30, 40 feet wide, however, but it's an embankment goes up behind him, and there's pine trees. And all of a sudden, there's this huge splash right in front of him, massive rock, like basketball-sized rock, splash, and it hits, and he sees it to come in and land. And I was talking to this guy on the phone. He told me this, and he spins around and looks up the hill, and he sees this 8 or 9 foot tall monster standing there 100 feet away, just half out from behind a tree. And as soon as he spins around, he says it darted into the woods, and he runs after it. And I'm thinking to myself, there is no way. Something's missing here. You're either leaving something out, or this is not exactly what happened. So I feel you. This it's unfortunate that we have to deal with this in this subject, but for the most part, when you get someone on camera, most people that are not telling the truth are not going to want to get on camera to do it. They may call you, they may write it down. Things tend to be written out a lot better, when people are not telling the truth. But when it comes to getting someone face to face on camera, they usually just won't do it. I've had plenty decline for us. But I feel you. I know what you mean.
Yeah, definitely. You're like, no sane person's going to run towards something like that. Your instincts kick in as well. And it's also, I think in all the kind of encounters, even when you go back into folklore, because these things do crop up in Scottish folklore occasionally, and they're seen as devils or demons or all this kind of stuff. Yeah, and well, there's also the old troll legends from Norse, big hairy men that live deep in the woods that are fierce, and nothing. I mean, in our whole history, it's like we're scared of these things. We've always been scared of these things, and there may have been a time, maybe before we developed projectile weapons, that they hunted us at times. You know what I mean? It's kind of, I don't know. From my experience, we can't be around them. You don't have a peaceful encounter. You know what I mean?
There's a reason they hide from us.
It's serious brown trousers time. You know what I mean? And dogs hate them as well. They just instinctively seem to react really badly to them. And so you think, I think that, for a long, long time they've been around us, but we've kind of mythologized them because we didn't understand what they were. And instinctively, you're not going to run after that. You're going to be either frozen at the spot or legging it the other direction. You know what I mean? You would have to be on something to run off towards something like that, I think.
Going back to big cats, do you know what the cattle loss figures are?
No.
I know Paul Sinclair knows over on Bempton side. I think there was like 60 sheep one year in a certain area.
Yeah.
That have just disappeared, or found, even mutilated as well.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I know that occasionally, I'll read up on these stuff, and there was a bit of a concern down in the borders in recent years because it was like a higher number of sheep going missing, and they thought it was rustlers or something. There was an incident at a farm not far from where I grew up, actually, just outside Dundee, and the sheep had gone missing. You could see where it had been dragged across a field and over a low wall and into some woodland. And I think they found the remains.
Right.
And there's been quite a lot of big cat sightings up that way over the years. But in terms of actual cattle loss, I don't imagine they're attributing it to big cats, though people seem to accept big cats are a thing now. They're not a mystery. They're
well known, aren't they, to be around. Got a question here. Hi, Betty Oils. After the news media had heard about the experience, did anyone come forward when it had kind of blown up for you? Did any other accounts come out?
Yeah, so as I say, I got sent a sighting from up in Angus, and it had detail, and the guy didn't. He says my wife saw it when we were driving along the road, and he gave me all the details and pinpointed it on Google Maps, and I went up and looked. We had quite a few people kind of coming online and saying they'd seen things. I did a talk in Glasgow, and I had people saying, well, we found this big footprint when we were out walking in Argyll, and we didn't think to do anything about it. We didn't photograph it. I had a nice old couple who used to have a cabin up by Loch Awe, and they said they'd go up in the summer, and every summer And these cabins are quite remote. They're in the forests and stuff, and someone would throw rocks at their cabin when they were up there, to the point that they stopped going up. They said, we thought it must have been kids or something, which
Right.
didn't make a lot of sense. They go, no, maybe it wasn't that. So people will come out. If you talk about it, yeah, people have kind of come out and occasionally passed on a sighting. It has brought a few out, you know. I think over the past so many years, not just my work, but other people. I mean, Debbie Hatswell has kind of compiled quite a big database of things, and people will contact her. So there is a much bigger forum for sightings coming out. But yeah, I have had people contact me directly to tell me what they've experienced.
And you know, it was just once in the newspaper. But if people don't hear about these things, you don't know where to go,
Yeah.
would you? And especially if you're a certain age and you don't use the internet,
Well,
or look
yeah.
at
Well,
newspapers, even you wouldn't even know who to
what
report.
happened was, it was a journalist from the Sunday Post, which is a very Scottish newspaper. A lot of older people read this, you know. It's
Right.
got knitting tips and all sorts. You know, it's really kind of one of these old. It's a very traditional old Scottish newspaper, but the journalist got a good rep for interviewing people who've seen strange things and not ridiculing them. So I spoke to him, and then the local newspaper from where I come from, they asked to speak to me, and I was like, right, okay, yeah, I wouldn't mind giving it, like, talking to them about it, because it's from that area and maybe more people come forward. But then somehow the tabloids got a hold of that, and it just went viral, and it was all very twisted and made me look like I was nuts, and that wasn't so great.
Oh no, I can
But
imagine.
yeah, it kind of really blew up after that for a brief period of time. So yeah, the word got out, much to my family's embarrassment.
Got one here from Paul Holland. Hi, Paul. Are there any key forested areas in Scotland that you think are their home bases?
I think, as I say, areas where you're not talking Ben McDewey and things like that. You know, up in the high Highlands, it's very bare. You're looking more at kind of the lower hills where there's a lot of forestation. And I don't know, I suspect they move around a bit. I think if they find a good base, they're likely to, because that seemed to be what happened around where I had seen things. There was a good area up there. That's all changed. The woods are gone. You know, it's all changed now, and they're not there anymore. But I kind of suspect they probably have to move around. But why move if you don't have to? So yeah, kind of low hills with lots of forest and kind of wooded areas, as I say. It doesn't. I don't think they have to be hundreds of miles away from people. Yeah, I don't know about particular home bases, though. I do think there's been quite a lot of area, like Aberdeenshire seems to be an area where there's been quite a few sightings, and then up in kind of the Perthshire areas, Loch Tay and Loch Awe and all these kind of up towards the Highlands, but it's all very forested up there, so there have been sightings up that way as well, but I couldn't pinpoint one specific.
Can you see a corridor then, I guess, of some sort?
It could quite easily be. I mean, there's nothing to say they don't migrate, not just in Scotland, but across the whole Isle. I mean, some people believe they use train tracks as green corridors.
Yeah, and also near me, Forester Bowland, apparently there's been quite a lot of. It seems to be where they think they might hang out around that area. I mean, there's so much around there: quarries, rivers. What we think they need. Pardon?
Is that in the north of England, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm up in the northwest, so between Lancaster and Carlisle, all that Forester, Bowland. Probably warm as well, you know, a bit warmer. I'm not sure that matters to them or not, but a lot of cave systems around there as well. And so got another one from here from Andy. Gone fishing. Was there any commonality between your encounters, like smell, mannerisms? The three you saw, did you connect them together at all?
Not until later. And there was no smell. I don't remember any strong smells. That's something that I never came across. Not that I, you know, as I say, living in the countryside, you come across a lot of strong smells, but you know, there was nothing specific to any of those encounters like that. And it was only later when I started looking into it, I started to think, okay, these three encounters, these three strange things are all connected. You know, they're kind of large figure at night with eye shine from 200 feet away is not a person. You don't get eye shine
No.
when you're
Do you
driving
say
along.
it's orange as well?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, the colour of old sodium streetlights, it was kind of that orange colour, you know what I mean? Yeah, just standing, staring at the car, which people don't stand in the middle of the road and stare at your car when you're coming towards them in the countryside. You know, and you don't get eye shine.
No.
That's something that so and the call, it was weird. And as I say, it was only later because I didn't know what I'd seen. And I just didn't know how to quantify it. It was only later that I was like, oh God, it looks like stuff's been going on up there. That went on up there for a couple of years. So yeah, it was only then because they all kind of fitted into other
You
accounts.
hear some people reporting that these eye shining illuminates, not like anything's been shone on it, but like self-illuminating. Have you heard anything like that?
I've heard of that. I don't know how that would be possible. If we're working on the premise that these things are primates, they won't have that membrane in the eye that nocturnal animals have, the tapetus lucidum. They won't have that. But what they will have is much, much bigger eyes. They'll have much, much bigger like pupils.
Okay.
It could be that they're just much, much better at reflecting that light. They're catching it from ambient light. So it appears that they're glowing, but they actually are catching the light from, it could be starlight or whatever.
Moon or whatever.
I don't know. I mean, I've never seen glowing red eyes on their own on a dark night, happily.
Yeah.
So no.
Fortunately, yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know about that. It's
Okay. I got one here from how you doing, Lee? Are there any old stories of wild men in your area that could actually be Sasquatch? So going back to, you know, wild man, forest, woes. What's the tradition around there? Tradition, I mean, maybe more.
There's lots of different kind of odd creatures in Scottish folklore that could be a number of things. I do remember one particular folk story that I came across, and it's from up in the Loch Tay area, and it describes, basically the story is how this guy basically goes out and vanquishes an evil demon that is living in the woods. But this evil entity, what it describes is it lived in a cave area in this wooded kind of, and it was near a path that they would use to kind of like travel from one place to another, and you couldn't go there after dark. You'd get torn to pieces. Also, they had to stop taking their animals up to the sheilings, up to the pastures, because this thing had torn the buildings apart, thrown stones, ripped up bushes, you know, and basically, and the, you know, and the description of it when he goes to vanquish this big black creature that's standing there, you know, and that to me really described a lot of territorial type behavior, like you might see more in North America. You don't really get that here, but it's like, you know, it was very like that kind of type of description, and that's from a good few hundred years ago. There's also a tale from up near Aviemore. Rothiemurchus Forest is quite a big forested area in the Cairngorm National Park, and there is a legend that there is this spirit of a great fierce warrior that lives in this forest, and if you go in and you run away from it, you'll not come out, but if you stand your ground, you will walk out of the forest. You know, it's kind of these kind of things. You're just like, yeah, that's quite interesting. You know, that, you know, there's all sorts of odd stuff, but they're the two that kind of stand out to me the most.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? These tales that they're supposed to man you up, I guess, or not. I don't know whether they're done to do that. Anyone else got any more questions in the chat? What are you going to do next? What's your plan? Are you wanting to get back into this a bit more? Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I think first things first, I need to get a car because it's kind of difficult to to do anything when you and maybe just sort of tentatively get back in. I don't want to kind of go down the same route I went down before. I think it's more kind of independent research and linking in with people that have my view on it in terms of, look, we need to look at this in a rational way and let's see what tech we've got, and kind of maybe try and kind of be quite selective about who I research with, because I think it's one, it can be quite dangerous going tromping off by yourself, but also it would be good to have other folk involved in a more kind of concerted way. So yeah, I've got, luckily I don't work shifts anymore. I've got a Monday to Friday job nowadays, and I get paid a bit better. So it's kind of maybe a few more resources. Get a car, that's the big thing. That's my goal this year, is so then it's because Scotland's not a big place, and we're one of the few places we're lucky enough you can go wild camping and things like that. So
Nice.
kind of just try and start building a bit more kit and actually just trying to get out there again. And maybe I quite liked interviewing witnesses. I quite liked that part of it. You know, when you get a really good witness, and that's a really good thing, you know what I mean? When you
Yeah.
can kind of hearing other people's stories and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it'll probably slowly happen. Lockdown's easing a bit now, so it should make it a bit easier to kind of meet up with folk and stuff. So
I definitely think, listening to someone than looking at a photograph or a blur or whatever,
yeah,
you can get so much more from the person telling the story than someone finding a Bigfoot in your photo 2 years later because you put it out there. It's for someone to look at. What have we got? One here from Hilton. How you doing, Hilton? What are the most common encounters that people tell about there?
I don't know. It's kind of the same as you get over in the States in a lot of cases. Like someone ran across the road at night and they don't know what it was. Like, you know, as I say, this gorilla type thing ran across the road. That's something that comes up. Yeah, there's a lot of that kind of just fleeting kind of sightings where you shouldn't see something like that.
What do you think they're doing? You know, they're so good, they want to hide from us. Suddenly they see something approaching with lights on and they decide to walk out in front of it.
Maybe they're already in motion, you know what I mean? Or maybe they're chasing a deer or something. It's I don't know. Maybe
right,
just, you know, it could be that they're already full tilt running and they don't have time to stop, or they think they can make it before. I don't know what they make of cars, but they don't seem to. As I say, something standing in the middle of the road looking at you driving up the road in front of it is a bit, you know. But yeah, I don't know. As I say, it's when they make mistakes. You know, just maybe they're just already on their way somewhere.
And going, yeah.
It's better
Rich is asking, can we put a link to your description, to your channel later? Have you got a channel to?
Yeah, I'll get the link on over to you.
Yeah, send me the link and I'll put it up in the
There's
description.
not a lot on there because I haven't done anything for ages.
All right.
There's a lot on there. So
well, people will check you out and maybe give you the incentive to get out there and start it up again. But yeah, I think there's definitely worth getting with some realistic people who are willing to do something a bit different in terms of looking, because, you know, sat in those groups, it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. For me personally, it's a solo journey in a way. With you know, and finding people on the way that have the same mindset. And
I think if you're going to do serious research, you've got to be careful you don't cast your net too wide, and you've got to keep everything quite tight and keep it private until you've got really good stuff to present.
Yeah.
I think that that's the way I would want to go forward. Is it's the same way you do anything from a kind of a research basis. It's like, I'm not presenting evidence till I've got evidence. I'm not putting an argument forward until I've got something to back it up. That's the best way to go about it. And I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think I've been on Facebook for, oh God, years. The odd comment on a family or a friend's post, but that's about. I haven't gone into the forums. I've just stayed away.
Yeah. You probably haven't missed much. In fact, I can guarantee you won't miss much.
It's like, if anybody really wants to talk to me about this stuff, they can message me. You know what I mean? I don't need to be going into forums. You know, people can message me if there's something they want me to know, or there's something they want to chat about. I'm quite happy for that to happen. But yeah, not. I just used to find myself getting really, really angry about stuff that didn't matter, and you'd just be sitting there like this rage, and you're like, "This is bad. This is bad for me."
Yeah, same for me. I've walked away from a lot of groups. It just, and I don't know why it gets to you, doesn't it? And you think, why am I getting worked up over something? And it's people's reactions more than what we're talking about. Seems to be, you post something and then you get a personal attack. And people aren't attacking, attack the post, but don't make a personal thing about it. That's not how you have a discussion. It's, very, very childish in a way. I don't know, but I've had enough of that kind of thing. Just not getting us anywhere. But look, I'd love you to come back, talk again about this subject, and I'd get someone else on as well, so we could have even a 4-way discussion on moving forward with research and how we go about it, or how we do something different even.
That would be good.
But that would be great. But we've come to our hour. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. We're both up late. Everyone it's still early for everyone else watching here, but we're the only ones up at probably 1 o'clock in the morning. But thanks for coming on. Thanks to everyone in the chat. Tomorrow night we're on. It's Anything Goes, and I'm joined by Max Powers, Jason, of course, and Max Powers. The Kitty Swear Jar is up at $120. So Max, anyone else, if you're feeling like I didn't explain to you, Charmaine, I didn't think I had to with you, but there's kind of no swearing on the channel. It's an adult channel. I can't stop people swearing, but if they want to swear, it's $10 a swear word. So, they can do it or not. It's up to them. If they're feeling rich, they can go for it. But thanks again. You hang on there a minute and I'll just talk to you after the show. Thanks, everyone. Hopefully see you tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Central. And have a good night, everyone. Good night.